have any kind of word of advice that you'd like to leave with the listeners?
I would actually, and again, knowing that your audience is interested in the issues of gender equality and women's empowerment. One of the other things that I've come across so often with our clients, and I wanted to share with you and your audience, is the fact that there are so many opportunities now coming up for women, and that's wonderful, and rightly so. And you know, for instance, in the UAE, of course, gender equality is very much one of the key topics as far as the government's concerned, and they've declared, you know, the 30% target for in management, and of course, you know, the head of Expo is a woman, the head of the Hope Mission is a woman. I believe there's something like 60% of government in the UAE is a women, so that's fantastic. But one of the things that we find so often talking to women is the issue of self-sabotaging, and that you can have external opportunities, and we talk a lot about, you know, breaking through the glass ceiling, all of this sort of thing in terms of the external opportunity. Yes, but so often there's this almost like an internal glass ceiling that prevents women from taking those real opportunities. And of course, it's sometimes called the imposter syndrome, isn't it? This idea that inside you think, oh, but I don't really think I can do it. I'm just going to be found out after a while.
Yeah.
I was reading some stats the other day that said that if there's a job vacancy, that men will apply for it if they fulfill 60% of the requirements, whereas women will only apply if they feel they fulfill 100% of the requirements. But I think that, you know, it's so much about you've got to take the time. If you're feeling, you know, that you're going to self-sabotage, then the first thing to do, I always say to women, is take the time to sort of get to know yourself again. Remember the times back in your past, your achievements, when you absolutely nailed it, that perhaps you and nailed it through your talent and your hard work. And when you think about that particular event, prior to that, you were probably still filled with apprehension and doubt. And yet, looking back through the lens of hindsight, you can now see you absolutely nailed it and that you can do it again. So try to sort of shrug off those feelings of the sort of imposter syndrome. And the other one of the big biases, of course, that women face is what's called the maternal wall. And for those women who are coming back after perhaps maternity leave, it is definitely, and it's been proven, you spoke about break the bias, this unconscious bias that often work colleagues will make an assumption that you can't possibly be as efficient as you were before, because surely your priority will be with your baby. And the fact is that, you know, of course you can do both, you can juggle both. And then thirdly, recognize the power of the support group. So if you do have doubts, recognize that, you know, surround yourself with great women who are of like mind within your colleagues, within your friends, neighbors, whatever. And remember that you can, and it needs to be a space where you feel psychologically safe, where you feel you can share your doubts, but equally gain inspiration from their achievements as well. But I think it's, if I could say to any of your female listeners who are sort of thinking, well, I don't know, I've got this opportunity, but I don't know whether I can do it. Try not to self-sabotage, and also failure is part of success. We really learn when we fail, and not to fear it. It'll make you stronger. So I think that's my advice, I would say.
That's lovely. I think that you hit the nail on the head. I think everything you said not only applies to, you know, it applies to women of all generations, essentially. Every woman is going to somehow be discriminated against, feel that, glass ceiling, whether it's external or internal, just like you said. And it's important that we keep pushing each other forward and reminding each other, you are worthy, you have the skills, you have the future. And the thing you said about working moms, especially, really, like, that resonated with me. I have in my day job, I have a couple of colleagues as well that are working mothers, and I always have the most respect for them, because I think to myself, like, you do this with X number of children, you work late at nights if you need to, and I just find it astounding how people can continue to do that. But I do have one more question for you, if that's okay. I wanted to ask you kind of a bit more detail about the actual business model that you have. So I know that you've mentioned that you're combining kind of AI data with the idea of adapting DEI into businesses. What does that look like? What's the process of working with a client and kind of implementing that process?
Right. Well, if I say, first of all, in the issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion, the three biggest challenges for people involved in this field, and most of them tend to come from the HR field, is number one, that they don't have access to DEI relevant data. And because they don't, and I'm not just talking about the numbers in terms of, we spoke about this 30% target for women in management or whatever. I'm talking about much wider issues about, defining an inclusive culture and working out what really is preventing an inclusive culture from extending across an organization. There's a great deal spoken about now about the Great Resignation, where particularly millennials and Generation Zs are returning from the lockdowns and working from home, and they've had time to think and work out, is this really what I want to do now? And there's also now the great discontent. I was reading some research recently that said in America, 70% of workers are either actively looking for a new role or passively, which means, 7 out of 10 people are likely to walk out of the door soon if organizations don't, sort themselves out.
Do something about it,
Yeah. And so this idea of having proper data, DEI relevant data, having access to that, that's the first challenge. And then the second challenge is understanding, as I've mentioned earlier, I like a cyclic conversation, coming back to where we started, that the impact on the top and the bottom line of any initiatives that are started. And then the natural progression of that is that when people can understand what's really happening, the impact to the business, then they can both gain and continue to maintain executive level support, so that the budgets that they need to do more and make more improvements will continue to come. So how does that wrap into PREDIXA? So what we do is when we work with organizations, we start by understanding what their key challenges and objectives are. We also gather a certain amount of hard data, so key performance indicators, the metrics there. And then we gather the data, the both soft and hard data, by means of artificial intelligence through, to put it very simply, it's a very intelligent survey. So normally surveys, everyone gets asked the same questions, and therefore it lacks analysis. It's efficient and speedy, but it doesn't give you that much information. A lot of organizations talk about, oh, well, we do employment engagement surveys, it's all going to be fine. But invariably, they can be rather meaningless, actually. Whereas what we do is, as people engage in the process, our AI engine, Ava, we call her, Fishy. Our AI engine is listening to the way people are responding. I thought the pod just fell out.
It's all good.
You can hear me.
Technical difficulties.
Yes. Our AI engine is listening to their responses and reacting by pulling different statements out of our huge repository to present later. So it means that we can slowly dig down deep and peel back the layers of the onion and find out what's really going on, to get the depth of analysis along with the speed and therefore reduce cost of if we were to do it in the traditional way of face-to-face interviews. And then having gained that data, that then provides the baseline. We come up with little sprint suggestions of how to improve, if you like, the low-hanging fruit issues, and then run it again maybe 3 or 4 months later, and then you begin to see the benchmark improvements over time. So that gives the HR and DEI leaders their DEI related data. They can then see the impact, and then they can share that with their executives to ensure that they keep getting support and the budgets that they need to continue to improve. And then, of course, from a wider issue, the workforce then, and other key stakeholders actually, because you've got your customers, you've got your investors, you've got the government, as well as your employees. Everyone can start to see the real return on that investment. And so that's sort of where we come from, which is quite a new way of approaching this topic.
100%. Yeah. No, that definitely makes sense. I think that that's something that I did not think was possible, I have to say. So that was very interesting to hear about. Thank you so much for breaking that down for me. I realized that we didn't touch on that earlier on, so I really wanted to bring that up for the listeners kind of before we wrap up. But
thanks.
I think that what you're doing is formidable. I think that you are Iron Lady. Like it's incredible to see kind of what you've done, where you've come from, how you've learned these lessons. So I want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your time.
It's been a great pleasure, Sarah. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And for the listeners, if you'd like to check out their LinkedIn page as well, they're on there. That's where I'll be posting this episode. And I appreciate your time, Paula, as always, and looking forward to speaking to you again soon.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.